Betsy-Tacy by Hart Lovelace. Illustrated by Lois Lenski. Chapter 7. Playing Paper Dolls. Quite often after school, Betsy and Tacy went to Betsy's house and played paper dolls. Betsy and Tacy liked paper dolls better than real dolls. They wanted real dolls too, of course. The most important thing to see on Christmas morning, poking out of a stocking or sitting under a tree, was a big china doll, with yellow curls and a blue silk dress and bonnet, or with black curls and a pink silk dress and bonnet. It didn't matter which. But after Christmas, they put those dolls away and played with their paper dolls. They cut the paper dolls from fashion magazines. They could hardly wait for their mother's magazines to grow old. Mrs. Benson didn't have any children, so she saved her fashion magazines for Betsy and Tacy. And when Miss Mead, the sewing woman, came to Betsy's house, she could be depended upon to leave a magazine or two behind. The chief trouble Betsy and Tacy had was in finding pictures of men and boys. There had to be father dolls and brother dolls, of course. The tailor shops had men's fashion sheets, but those fashion sheets were hard to get. Tacy's brother George worked next door to a tailor shop. He told Mr. Baumgarten, the tailor, that his little sister Tacy liked those fashion sheets. After that, Mr. Baumgarten saved all his fashion sheets for Tacy, and Tacy divided them with Betsy. The dolls were not only cut from magazines, they lived in magazines. Betsy and Tacy each had a doll family living in a magazine. The servant dolls were kept on a pile between the first two pages. A few pages on was the pile of father dolls. Then came the mother dolls, and then the 16-year-olds, the 10-year-olds, the 8-year-olds, the 5-year-olds, and the babies. Those were the dolls that Betsy and Tacy played with after school. Betsy and Tacy stopped in at Tacy's house to get her magazine and eat a cookie. Then they went on to Betsy's house, and when Betsy had kissed her mother and both of them had hung their wraps in the little closet off the back parlor, Betsy brought out the magazine in which her doll family lived. "Shall we play here beside the stove, Mamma?" she asked. "Yes, that would be a good place to play," said Mrs. Ray, and it was. The fire glowed red through the isinglass windows of the big hard coal heater. It shone on the wild horses' heads, which ran in a procession around the shining nickel trim. Up on the warming ledge the tea kettle was singing. Underneath the stove, on the square metal plate which protected the green flowered carpet, Lady Jane Grey, the cat, was singing too. She opened one sleepy eye, but she kept on purring as Betsy and Tacy opened their magazines. "What shall we name the 5-year-old today?" Tacy asked Betsy. The 5-year-olds were the most important members of the large doll families. Everything pleasant happened to them. They had all the adventures. The 8-year-olds lived very dull lives, and they were always given very plain names. They were Jane and Martha, usually, or Hannah and Jemima. Sometimes Betsy and Tacy forgot and called them Julia and Katie. But the 5-year-olds had beautiful names. They were Lucille and Evelyn, or Madeline and Millicent. "We'll be Madeline and Millicent today," Betsy decided. They played that it was morning. The servant dolls got up first. The servant dolls wore caps with long streamers and dainty ruffled aprons. They didn't look at all like the hired girls of Hill Street. But like hired girls, they got up bright and early. The fathers and mothers got up next. Then came the children, beginning with the oldest. The 5-year-olds came dancing down to breakfast in the fingers of Betsy and Tacy. "What are you planning to do today, Madeline?" Betsy's father doll asked his 5-year-old. "I'm going to play with Millicent, Papa." Madeline and Millicent pronounced Papa, Papa. "And I'm going to play with Jemima," said Betsy's 8-year-old, who was named Hannah today. "No, Hannah," said her father, "you must stay at home and wash the dishes. But Madeline may go. Wouldn't you like to take the carriage, Madeline? You and Millicent could go for a nice ride. Here is $1 in case you want some candy." "Oh, thank you, Papa," said Madeline. She gave him an airy kiss. Meanwhile, Tacy's dolls were talking in much the same way. Both father dolls were sent quickly down to work. The mothers went shopping. The babies were taken out in their carriages by the pretty servant dolls, and the older children were shut in the magazines. Then Betsy and Tacy each took her 5-year-old in hand, and the fun of the game began. First, they went to the candy store under the patent rocker. Madeline's dollar bought an enormous quantity of gumdrops and candy corn. Next, they sat down in their carriage, which was made of a shoebox. There were 2 strings attached, and Betsy and Tacy were the horses. Madeline and Millicent took a beautiful ride. They climbed the back parlor sofa. That was a mountain. "Let's have a picnic," said Madeline. So they did. They picnicked on top of a pillow which had the head of a girl embroidered on it. They swished through the dangling bamboo curtains which separated the back parlor from the front parlor. And in the front parlor they left their carriage again. They climbed the piano stool. That was a merry-go-round, and of course they had a ride. After calling on Mrs. Vanderbilt, who lived behind the starched lace curtains at the front parlor window, and Mrs. Astor, who lived under an easel which was draped in purple silk, they slipped by way of the dining room into the back parlor again. And there they met with their greatest adventure. The Betsy horse began to rear and snort. "What's the matter?" asked the Tacy horse. "A tiger! A tiger!" cried the Betsy horse. She jumped and kicked. The Tacy horse began to jump and kick too, looking about her for the tiger. Lady Jane Grey was awake and washing her face. "She's getting ready to eat us!" cried the Betsy horse, leaping. "Help!" cried the Tacy horse, leaping too. They leaped so high that they overturned the carriage. Out went Madeline and Millicent on the highway of the green flowered carpet. "We're running away!" shouted the Betsy horse. "Whoa, whoa!" shouted the Tacy horse. They ran through the rattling bamboo curtains into the front parlor. There they stopped being horses and raced back, out of breath, to be Madeline and Millicent again. Lady Jane Grey loved to play with paper. She entered obligingly into the game. "He's biting me!" shrieked Madeline. "He's scratching me!" shrieked Millicent. The tiger growled and pounced. Madeline and Millicent were rescued just in time. The father dolls rushed up and seized them and jumped into the coal scuttle. Lady Jane Grey jumped in too, and jumped out looking black instead of gray, and Betsy and Tacy scrambled in the coal scuttle, trying to fish out the father dolls before they got too black. There were never enough father dolls, in spite of Mr. Baumgarten. Julia and Katie came in just then from skating. The opening door brought in a rush of winter cold and dark. "Well, for goodness sake," they cried, "for goodness sake." They cried it so loud that Betsy's mother came in from the kitchen where she was getting supper. "Betsy," she cried, "come straight out here and wash, and use soap and a washcloth and warm water from the kettle. You too, Tacy." "Yes, ma'am," said Betsy and Tacy. When they had washed, they put their paper dolls back into the magazines, and Katie helped Tacy into her outside wraps and took her by the hand, and they started home. Right at the door, Tacy turned around to smile at Betsy. "Whoa," she said instead of goodbye. "Gidap," said Betsy instead of come again. "Whoa, gidap. Whoa, gidap," they said over and over. "Whatever are you two talking about?" said Julia and Katie crossly, which was just what Betsy and Tacy had hoped they would say. Chapter 8. Easter Eggs. Julia and Katie were nice sometimes. They were nice when it came time to color Easter eggs. That happened a few days before Easter. It seemed to be still winter. There was lots of snow outside, and coal still went rattling into the back parlor stove. But Betsy and Tacy knew that spring was near. All of a sudden, they didn't care a bit about sliding downhill on their sleds. All they could think or talk about was coloring Easter eggs. They colored the eggs in Betsy's kitchen. Tacy's little sister Beatrice was sick. She was Bee the baby, and she was very sick. Mrs. Ray kept Katy and Tacy over at her house all she could. Julia and Katy put on big aprons and acted important, but not too important. They let Betsy and Tacy help coloring the eggs. First, they collected all the cups they could find which had handles missing and cracks along the sides. Then they dissolved the dye in warm water from the kettle, each color in a different cup. The eggs were placed in the cups for a while, and when they were taken out, they were red or purple or orange. The colors were so bright, it was thrilling to look at them. On Easter morning, everyone ate as many eggs as he could. At Betsy's house, they did. "I ate 3, said Betsy, when Tacy came running over to ask, "and my papa ate 5. "I ate 3 too, said Tacy, "and last year my brother George ate 10. But this year nobody paid much attention to eggs at our house, except Katy and Paul and me." That was because baby Bee was sick. They went to church, though, from Tacy's house. Everyone in the family went, except Tacy's mother, who stayed home with Bee. And Tacy had a new hat, navy blue because she had red hair. It was straw and showed her ears and had stiff gay flowers on the top. Betsy had a new hat which looked much the same, and she went to church too, with her father and mother and Julia. Her mother sang in the choir, and the church smelled of lilies. Betsy liked Easter. She liked it especially after church, for Katy and Tacy came to dinner. They had chicken, and everyone was very well behaved. After dinner, they sat by the back parlor stove and played with their colored eggs. Katy and Tacy were to stay until they were called for. By and by it grew dark. Mrs. Ray said, wouldn't it be fun if they could stay all night? Katy could sleep with Julia and Tacy with Betsy. But after supper, Mr. Kelly came over. "Thank you very much," he said, "but Mrs. Kelly wants the children home." Tacy put her colored eggs into the pocket of her coat. She went home, and the next day she didn't come over. She didn't come over the next day, nor the next, for baby Bee died. Betsy's father and mother went to the funeral. Betsy was very lonesome for Tacy. The next morning she went out early before anyone was up. She often went out early in the summertime. Tacy did too, but it was strange going out early at this time of year. Betsy dressed in all her warm clothes, just as she knew she should. She dressed without waking Julia, and she stole down the stairs without waking her father and mother. And she got her coat and hood and overshoes and mittens out of the back parlor closet, and put them on softly, and went softly out of the side kitchen door. The lilac bush stood by that door. It didn't seem to be awake. The snow which had melted yesterday had frozen in the night, and it hadn't come unfrozen yet. Everything in Hill Street seemed to be waiting for the sun. The trees and houses waited in a dim gray light. Behind the White House, which stood on the big hill, the sky was colored pink. Betsy walked over to Tacy's house and looked at the upstairs windows. Tacy must have known that Betsy would come over. After a while she came out of the house. She too had gotten up without waking a soul. She had put on everything warm, the way she knew her mamma would want her to, her coat and hood and overshoes and mittens. She even had her scarf tied around her neck. She and Betsy looked at each other, and then they started walking. "What shall we do?" asked Tacy. "Let's climb a tree," said Betsy. It wasn't the time of year for climbing trees, but Betsy and Tacy were great tree climbers, so they climbed a tree. They didn't climb Betsy's backyard maple, which was their favorite tree to climb. They went up the big hill until they found a tree with branches low enough to reach, and they climbed that and sat there. Somewhere a bird was singing a little up and down song. They couldn't see him, but they could hear him. His busy up and down song was the only sound in the world. Hill Street was still sleeping, but the color in the sky was spreading. Gold sticks in the shape of a fan were sticking up over the hill. After a while, Tacy said, "It smelled like Easter in the church. Bee looked awful pretty. She had candles all around her." "Did she?" asked Betsy. "But my mamma felt awful bad," said Tacy. Betsy said nothing. "Of course," said Tacy, "you know that Bee has only gone to heaven." "Oh, of course," said Betsy. But Tacy's lip was shaking. That made Betsy feel queer. So she said quickly, "Heaven's awful nice." "Is it?" asked Tacy, looking toward her. Her eyes were big and full of trouble. "Yes," said Betsy. "It's like that sunrise. In fact," she added, "that's it. We can't see it during the day, but early in the morning they let us have a peek." "It's pretty," said Tacy, staring. "Those gold sticks you see, those are candles," said Betsy. "There's a gold-colored light on all the time, and there are harps to play on. They're something like pianos, but you don't need to take any lessons, you just know how to play." "Bee's having a good time up there," said Betsy, looking up into the sky. Tacy looked too. "Can she see us?" "Of course she can see us. She's looking down right now. And I'll tell you what tickles Bee. She knows all about heaven and we don't. She's younger than we are, but she knows something we don't know. Isn't that funny? She's just a baby, and she knows more than we do." "And more than Julia and Katie do," said Tacy. "Even more than our fathers and mothers do," said Betsy. "It's funny when you come to think of it." "She is a long way from home, though," said Tacy. "But she gets all the news," said Betsy. "Do you know how she gets it? Why, from the birds. They fly up there and tell her how you are and what you're all doing down at your house." "Do they?" asked Tacy. And just at that moment the little up and down song stopped, and there flew past them, going right up the hill, a robin redbreast. He was the first robin they had seen that spring, and he was as a red Easter egg. He flew up the hill fast, as though he knew where he was going. "He's going to see Bee, of course," Betsy said. "He'll be back in a minute." Tacy put her hand in her pocket, and it touched the colored Easter eggs she had brought from Betsy's house. "Betsy," she said, "do you suppose he'd take one of these Easter eggs to Bee?" "Of course he would," said Betsy. "The only trouble is how to give it to him." She looked about her. She looked up, and high up in the tree was a nest. It was a big, ragged nest. It looked as though it had been there all winter. But it was a nest. It was a bird's house. "Give me the egg," she said. "Which one are you sending?" "The purple one," said Tacy. "It's the prettiest." "I'll put it in that nest," said Betsy. "The robin can take it up in its mouth." So Betsy took the purple egg, and she put it in the pocket of her coat. And she climbed up the tree, higher than she had ever gone before. She didn't look down. She looked up instead. She held on tight with her arms to the rough trunk of the tree, and she felt for the branches with her feet. She climbed to the very top of the tree and put the purple egg in the nest. "There," she said when she came back to Tacy. "Bee will like that egg." They scrambled down the tree and skipped down the hill. The sunrise was almost finished. A pale, surprised light was spreading over Hill Street. Smoke was coming out of kitchen chimneys here and there. "Dyeing those Easter eggs was fun," said Tacy. "Yes," said Betsy, "and I saved the dye. Mamma was going to throw it out, but I teased her, and she let me have it." "What will we do with it?" asked Tacy. "I don't know exactly, but something. You'll see." So they skipped down the big hill to breakfast. They were hungry too. And for once, no one was calling Betsy and Tacy. No one was awake to call.